Heidi Grove for getting all the logistics and my staff too that like to that is all set up this evening earlier. So we're here for a regional working group meeting on the homelessness in Boulder County. It is October 16th. We are here for a couple hours to see what we might get done and really define some the work, etc. So please help yourself and grab more food for those of you that are physically here in the room.
Okay.
Everybody virtually, thanks for joining. Let's do introductions to get us started, and then I think we'll be really close to our 5:40 start. And we'll start online, and I believe they're Heidi and Christina. So Heidi, do you want to start?
Sure. Sorry I can't join you guys in person today. Heidi Grove, and I am the Director of the Division of Homeless Systems and Coordinated Response in Boulder County Housing Department. And I will turn it over to Christina.
Good evening, everybody. I'm also sorry I can't be there in person today. I'm Christina Pacheco, Human Services Director with the City of Longmont.
Thank you both for being here.
Barbara Hamilton, council member in Louisville.
Thank you for joining us.
Kurt Fernhaber and I support the Department of Housing and Human Services at the City of Boulder.
Thank you.
Lauren Folkerts, and I'm a council member for the City of Boulder.
Thank you.
Justin Brooks, the mayor here.
Susie Hidalgo Faring, coming from City Council, Longmont.
I'm Janet Peterson, Boulder County Administrator, Task Report.
Suzanne Hope is Baker, Boulder County Housing Authority Executive Director and Housing Department Director. Also supporting.
One of the county commissioners. So we're happy to host this meeting and have everybody together to talk about this, the last items that we had left out there in regards to action items. We gave some homework, so we'll get a chance to talk about that first and hear what folks are thinking in regards to the collective why and also some of those action items. So we're going to try and block it in the agenda on the calendar invite, and it's up there on the screen too. Thank you, Heidi, for timing, because we want to make sure we leave enough time to really make any decisions around next steps that we need to. So just I'm going to do my best to keep us on track. So first, let's talk about just homework, any of the videos that people watched, any notes that you had before we get into specific about your council's thoughts. So just reflections from folks, questions, dialogue around the different homework pieces. Was there anything that stood out for folks?
Thank you for sending that. It's very.
Yeah, it's wrong. Great, thank you. All right, which is great, as long as folks got it and use it in any way, that is going to be great. So let's go into what your council board's conversations were in regards to the why statement. And take a look at, this is what we were talking about together in that last exercise about the work on homelessness and what we're moving towards. So just to share if there was any comments, concerns, questions, rewrites on this part. Did anybody have, or did everyone get support?
Oh, go ahead. Oh, I was going to say, it was interesting because hearing other people, so when we were here last time discussing this, it all kind of evolved around the individual experiencing homelessness. When I spoke with other council members, it was, and even some staff, Harold, we were talking about the impact to community at large, like, so the impact to businesses, the impact to to residents when they're finding needles in their yards or, you know, other things that we're eating, so I'm not into it. So I'll just admit that right now. So looking at how there's many layers to homelessness and the impacts to community. So looking at community at large, I think that was the thing. Oh, we didn't really even talk about that part, that the impact. Others.
And if I can just kind of add, you know, Susie and as she said, talked with staff, other council members, and I think part of what I think the overarching sentiment, thoughts about this is that it's really not focusing, for us, it's really not focusing on the why, but really the what. And
Yes.
what what our specific municipalities, communities need, because we all need to approach this in a different way. It can be coordinated, as we've learned from HSBC and all the wonderful work that has happened there. But really, for us, it's about focusing on the what and then taking that regional approach where applicable. And so, you know, after the conversation that Harold, that you know, Councilmember Hidalgo Faring had with City Council, other council members, and then kind of the check-in with Harold, we started to kind of draft out a model of what that looks like for us. And so, I mean, yeah, I think at some point that's how we develop the strategy.
I asked a question, Christina, on
Sure.
when you talked about the what could be coordinated, but the work needs to be regional where applicable. When you just talk about what that means and then where.
Right. So, yeah. So, you know, we know that there are lots of reasons why, you know, why people end up unhoused. Is it, are there underlying mental health concerns? Is there substance misuse? Are they one check short of being homeless because of medical concern, because of job loss, of domestic violence? There's all of those contributing factors that can really lead somebody to be, you know, short-term unhoused all the way to chronically homeless. And so if we look at the needs in our different communities and our different municipalities, I would guess that there would be some similarities there, but the approach to how we might solve that might look really different from the city of Longmont to the town of Erie, where I live, or city of Boulder. And so what we can do is really start to look at that what, and the regional or the community, the local community, the municipality approach to that, and then look at kind of backfilling that or overlaying that service map with all of the different services that we have, to then look at how we take that regional approach. We have the work that the city of Boulder is doing. We have the affordable housing developments that are happening here in Erie. We have the permanent supportive housing that's being open in Longmont. We have all of these different resources. And so I'm wondering, we're wondering if it's not a question of why, but really what at this point. Does that help?
Yeah. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
So none, was there, oh, go ahead.
So the main modification our council was hoping to address would just be the striking of a single word. Real people pushed some people on our council the wrong way, and then, like, what would be the alternative? Like, it would just, maybe just be helping people.
Yeah.
Real.
Actual people as opposed to like general people.
Can we agree with that?
They're trying to get more personal. I don't matter for you.
I mean, I think it was just the idea that, like, who else would we be helping if they're not real people? Are we helping fake people? Like, what are we? Does this statement imply more than it should by emphasizing real people?
Does anyone object to that suggested change to the wording on this slide?
No.
It shows good slide.
And then there was generally, and I know that this is sort of different than what our exercise was, but there was an interest in maybe having, you know, something about the goal in terms of what we are trying to achieve. Like, yes, this is why we're doing it, but what are we trying to do? Are we trying to resolve homelessness? Are we like, is there a greater like
Objective?
objective that we're aiming for that could be incorporated into that?
Do you think something like with the goal to be there?
I don't know that I have a concrete idea of what I really would want to see there, and I'm kind of interested in if everyone else wants to go that direction or not. I think we can.
How about our work on ending homelessness is about helping people through compassion, support systems, and social justice.
That sounds great to me.
Our work towards ending.
I heard a suggestion, our work on, and we'll still have to slide it, that's up there, our work on ending homelessness, our work on,
Working towards ending homelessness. Our work towards ending homelessness. I think that's fine.
any objections to? I just want to ask because someone's going to say, what about eliminating versus ending? The next time we look at this slide. For your departments, does that mean, is there a difference?
Eradicate,
See?
$5 word.
I agree, and I saw the heads nodding, like there's an addition and that would be great. So
I think, you know, I'm thinking of a couple of people on my council that might say, well, you know, homelessness, it's been an age-old
Yeah, that's why I said,
issue.
that's why I added toward.
Towards.
Yeah,
So I think having that piece, but they'll still.
Yeah.
The word in.
it's an impossible goal.
It's an impossible, yes. But if we're working in that direction.
Absolutely.
Towards ending homelessness? Does everyone feel okay with that?
Yeah. The other thought I have is we're ending homelessness for individuals. I mean, ending homelessness is a big thing, is very aspirational, and somewhat unrealistic for us as a community, but when we end it on an individual one by one by one, that is also an important goal that we look at.
Heidi?
So the state actually has a why statement, and I wonder if there's something that maybe we could integrate a little bit, which is ensuring that experiences of homelessness are rare, brief, and one-time occurring. So there's not episodic and people cycling through experiences of homelessness. And so I just wanted to throw that out there.
I could see that being our work. To ensure homelessness is, and that list of things that Heidi stated is about helping real people through compassion, support. Can I add thoughts that came from our council? I think some items may be absent from this that's unique to the conversations we're having is we're doing regional work or we're proposing regional work. And I think that should really be highlighted here. It's a collective approach. So I don't want to rewrite this or over wordsmith it, but I think that's a really important part of this identity, of the identity of this group. Because otherwise it feels like this isn't unique to us, right? We have a different approach here that we're trying to facilitate. I don't know if there's any reactions to that.
I'm wondering about support. And we're in there. Our collective work towards ending homelessness to ensure that homelessness is rare, brief, one time occurring. And then add that same language in there is about helping people with compassion support systems, social justice. We can work through that unless anybody else have ideas about what they want to include in there, and we can, so that we don't do all the wordsmithing like what you're saying, but I want to capture anything else. Sure. Can you read that?
Yeah.
Half an hour?
Describing. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Our collective work towards ensuring that rare, brief, and one-time occurring is about helping people with compassion, support systems, and social justice.
And I wanted to please acknowledge what your statement was. For me, the only reason I wouldn't add individual in there is I think it would then create some consternation, like what about family homelessness?
Sure.
And then it'd be like, well, let's list every kind of homelessness.
Yeah.
I heard what you were saying, but I was thinking about it from.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Can I get like a thumbs up or a thumbs down, or I'm still in the middle and I don't know what to do? And I'll send you to the food. Okay. I see more thumbs up. Thank you, everybody. Like, that's just to like center us. This is the why. This isn't the what yet, because we're going to hear from everybody in a minute about where you are in actions. Let's go back to the pillars for a minute. Heidi, if you're feeling up to it, to just give a kind of a brief recap of that, and then we're going to go into the action items and what you all came back with from your boards and councils.
Yeah, I'm feeling up to it. Thank you, Commissioner. So we just kind of wanted to recenter into the federal pillars of the homeless system. And if you remember, there was that slide of 3 blocks and 3 blocks. So we figured we would just make it a little prettier and show how it's all interconnected, and that the foundation or the space that's holding it all together is equity, data driven practices and leveraging evidence based practices, as well as collaboration. Yes, collaboration's on there twice because it looked a little funky if it didn't have a balance. But within that space of what is holding and containing all of those efforts is crisis response, obviously prevention, crisis response, housing and post-housing supports are the solutions or the activities. So and with crisis response, that's things like housing focused shelter, housing focused outreach, diversion programs, coordinated entry. Prevention, of course, is things like access to gainful employment, recognizing that homelessness is a byproduct of downstream failed systems. So like the more you can connect people to workforce, the more that they can actually increase their livable wage and prevent homelessness from the first place. Rental assistance, ensuring decrease of rent burden, decrease of other systems that impacts that lead to homelessness. You name the system, you can find a connection to homelessness. And then for housing and post-housing supports, that's things like rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, post-housing residential support services, increased behavioral health resources, etc. So just wanted to root us back into kind of the things that we know work and the infrastructure in which we live in with the federal government as well. Commissioner, is there anything you want to add?
Well, I think that's a great recap. Did anybody have questions or did that bring anything up for anyone?
You know, as I'm looking at like the decreased rent burden, how much of that will us as a municipality, because of state laws, will that impact our ability? So, you know, looking at systems, some of the systems we have in place are because it's federal or state. So how can we kind of navigate through those to ensure that people aren't so rent burdened? So I'm thinking, you know, like I'm thinking about the creation of attainable housing. So, you know, other needs that we could also direct our attention to and being specific on what that looks like. Does that make sense?
It does. And you could have something localized, like a variation on section 8. You could have rental assistance, you could have temporary rent relief, you could have a fund for people who are in temporary crisis to get
Yeah.
rental assistance. So I think that, to me, that's what that speaks to, are those types of things.
I was thinking about, when you're asking that question, I was thinking about, as elected officials, we do have the ability to, on our affordable housing or housing authority properties.
Yes,
Like we are going to move our rents up or we're gonna hold them, i.e.
Yeah.
COVID.
like that. Yes.
So that's what I was thinking about.
Okay,
So
okay, that's what that's kind of, you know, the broader, you know, looking at people who own homes, who are, or own spaces that are renting out to other individuals.
Sector versus
Sector, yes, yes, yeah.
right? All right. Do you want to talk about that slide, Heidi?
Sure. So, from a systems perspective, part of taking the approach from a systems perspective is recognizing that decisions have ripple impacts, kind of like when you throw a rock into a lake, you see the kind of the ripples, the impact, and sometimes we don't think about those. So we wanted to talk about kind of some of those positive impacts and those unintended consequences of decisions that, you know, we've seen in this space. And I've been in this system space for over 20 years. So, you know, some of the positive expansions, and I'm happy to let Commissioner Loachamin, you want to take the first one? It's kind of a big win.
No, I'm happy. But I think it goes to this is what happens if we do advocacy. If we do advocacy work together and we stay, what I've been told is stay at 50,000 feet and stay in your lane. So that's like, as elected officials, how can we move policies? Go ahead, Heidi.
So through the work that Commissioner Loachamin has done with the Metro Area County Commissioners for the last couple of years, and I think you're kind of still an honorary vice chair. We were able to advocate in partnership with some of our other partners to increase. I'm sure you guys have all seen the news about Mayor Johnston's all-inside usage designation, which comes with lots of things we're uncovering. We were able to advocate that to be expanded to the entire metro region. And so we just recently had a meeting with the federal officers and are assessing how we can bring that support directly to Boulder County, its municipal partners. It's pretty exciting, and there's some great opportunity and potential there.
Thanks for your leadership.
So that's kind of one of those examples of how, you know, when you do things regionally, and that was in partnership with, you know, the city and county of Denver's council, city and county of Broomfield's council, and then Aurora, Douglas County. So it was definitely a group effort. Continuum of care coordination. We are in the continuum care of Metro Denver Homeless Initiative, which ironically aligns with the Metro Area County Commissioners. And just making sure that we are across the region implementing things in consistency. And then, of course, you guys have probably all heard of Built for Zero, which is the movement to end or reach functional zero, specifically for veteran homelessness. Boulder County was the first to be certified for quality data by a third party entity, if that Built for Zero work. And we have seen a steady reduction of veterans experiencing homelessness in our community because of those efforts. So those are like examples of when systems are working in collaboration and in partnership. And then some of the unintended things, like things that we see that are impactful, is some of our neighbors are moving away from housing first into a work first model. And that will have an impact on what we see in our communities. And divestment in homeless systems responses. So prime example, one of the big pieces out of the news this weekend was the city of Aurora has decided to close its all singles shelter. And so we will be monitoring our data to see how that has an impact over time.
Well, and just on a side note, they are closing it because they're transitioning it to a family shelter. So it's not entirely lost beds, just a different focus for them.
But there's like a 60-day period where there's nobody can have access to
Correct.
anything.
Yep.
Thank you. Any questions? Yeah, I guess, how do you see those, like, are those consequences of the other, what are those unintended consequences of? Like,
Well,
what we're doing in other realms, or?
I think, you see people who really a work first model is not going to work because their high acuity or their level of need is just not going to have them able to work first. And so a work first model where you're required to work and you don't have access to housing resources. And with the way that they're structuring their navigation center is very much modeled off the San Antonio model. I don't know if you know much about the San Antonio model. But the prior director of USICH, Robert Morbit, had developed this model. It's very similar to Colorado Springs, where you can have access to shelter if you're clean and sober. They do breathalyzers. It's not a low barrier shelter access, and you have to earn your way up through work and engagement to actually touch housing. So it's kind of the antithesis of housing first. So it's the old model from the early 90s or 80s where you had to, go to treatment first. You had to get a job first before you had access to housing resources. So those that can't do that, where do they go? So they go to places in which they, people connect to resources that they need. And so the other thing that, remind for us to remember, there was a case study done by our continuum of care that showed that an individual touched 8 different municipalities across the metro region before they actually accessed housing. So there is movement across communities. When one person is driving down 36, they don't know if they're in Broomfield or if they're in Boulder County, unless you read the signs, which most people don't because they're driving. So really just kind of recognizing decisions made over here have ripple impacts over here, and just being a little thoughtful and mindful on how we recognize our interconnectedness.
And I think specific to your question, column 1 and column 2 are separate columns.
And it's column 2 is things that have unintended consequences, not things that were created as unintended consequences. Yeah. Other things.
I'll answer my questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks,
That's what I
Dan.
was stumbling with. Thank you. I was like, what led to that? No, thank you for asking.
All right, are we ready to get into our share outs? Well, this is, I think, where we were almost headed. This is we talked about our why, got a new why statement forming. So let's talk about our how, and this is what everybody was going back to their councils and their boards with. So who wants to start? And this, let me really quickly.
this was what we came up with last time from a previous conversation. We talked about it a little bit, added another one in there. You remember these were like the most talked about ideas and repeated topics. And so that's where we started and we added the last one. So the assignment was, how do we define these? How does your council or your board define these so that it's an obtainable goal? It's an attainable action. It's something specific and not too broad is what we had talked about last time. So
Who wants to start?
Okay.
That's, okay, so as far as specific action, so I think there's quite a few we were able to identify that we're already doing in our community and that might be similar in other communities. One of which is the 12% goal that we are striving for. We have, Kestrel in our community, just had a meeting, the possible collaboration with Thistle to bring some more units into our community, possible collaboration with Habitat as well. So I think that 12% goal is already set in a really nice way to introduce the concept of this group and their work to contributing to that goal. Because we're already putting money towards that. We just approved 2 million in our budget, set aside for affordable housing. So that's some concrete work that we're doing in Louisville. Some other things as far as supportive services, we have Centennial Peaks in our community. We have mental health partners coming into our community as well. So that could be bucketed under some concrete work related to services. The gap that we identified is what happens after an individual leaves those facilities. We don't have those additional services after treatment is complete. So that's where the regional approach is really important to our city, because we also don't have the ability to stand those up, nor really should we. We should really bolster and support the great services that we have within our county, because eventually when you have all of these offshoots, they're not as strong as the collective work that the county could do. One of the other themes that popped up in my conversation with council members is in Louisville specifically, there is hidden homelessness, and that was agreed upon across by council members. There's also a strong desire to prevent homelessness, keep people housed. What exactly that looks like, I'm keeping the elected official high level view here, but that was another theme that my council members would like to discuss further. But did I address some of the topics with the services and the structures that we're currently working on?
I heard a focus on the second bullet point there about creation of affordable housing. And then also some of the support services. Did you all talk about the first one about advocacy? Was there any interest in specific advocacy?
I don't have specific groups, but there's a consensus that they're on board with that to get funding. Like I said, we have the 2 million set aside specifically in our budget. It's not pegged for anything specific other than affordable housing. It's not earmarked to be on that. But we would certainly be open to contributing to getting more funds through this collective group work to bolster the services of housing in the community.
So under that first one, the advocacy at the state, local, state, and federal levels, our council had 2 action items that they recommended. One was, working together to try and find more funding mechanisms to support this work. just trying to identify what those might be. And then trying to determine specific gaps so that so that we can collectively make very strong funding requests that are precise and detailed.
I forgot to add to the funding part, I'm sure you guys talked about this too, Prop 123. As well, like we apply, for that, so that's so I'm confused for this group as well. Right.
Yeah, we got.
You must,
Well, I can do the other ones for the other sections too.
if you want to, yeah. that's okay.
Sure, so for the creation of affordable housing, so there was with the 1B funding, there was a request to make sure that that's allocated directly to the cities so that we can distribute dollars in partnership with our nonprofits. Yeah, I just put it in. And then, I mean, this Boulder is already doing a lot of different work in a lot of different areas. So it was mostly trying to think about ways in which regionally we can do more. And so there's also a request to kind of think about the intersection of housing stability and healthcare. And if there's anything you do to continue to address some of those issues around, because often housing or healthcare costs can drive people into homelessness. Yeah.
Sounded like you were wrapped.
Providing supportive services. So there was a lot of interest in a roadmap or an inventory, particularly of mental health and behavioral health resources, so that we can better identify the gaps. And then also investing in a high utilizer program. Not just like we are already doing some of that, but while some things are really good concentrated, I think our council is really interested in seeing how we can support kind of diversified services as well. Just as a lot of things end up in our community often. So making sure that like when we're talking about supportive services and things like that, that those are also regionally shared and not only concentrated.
So investing in high utilizer
Programs kind of around distributed.
In looking at the advocacy at the local, state and federal level, we felt like definitely this was something that us as a collective, power in numbers, hearing from multiple cities, all signing on the same letter, that can be very meaningful. But really advocating at the state and federal level, especially around mental health and recovery resources. For substance abuse, addressing mental illness. I think about, the Latino Advisory Council that we go to for Congressman Bruce. And was it Erica who mentioned, one of the staff folks had mentioned that how in the House, they had voted down to not approve any grants. Remember that? So any grants that included mental health as an objective, they were denying those. They would deny us. You remember that conversation? I can't remember the types of grants it was, but it was very upsetting because mental illness is so interwoven in so many things. Reasons why people might be unhoused, reasons why people can't have a stable job. And and domestic violence and all, it impacts so many of our day to day, and even how an individual might interact with police officers. So having that training for different sectors to make sure that they are addressing, being sensitive to an individual's mental illness, or it be schizophrenia, or or autism, or any of the issues that might impact how people interact socially. So how can we as a collective advocate for better policy at the state and national level, and ensuring what we're doing at the local level doesn't inhibit? So I think for us at the local level, we have our core and leads teams. So the core is the co-respond. Help me with the acronym here, Christina. So core, it's co-response. What does the E mean?
Oh, now you're stumping me too.
Yeah, I'm sorry. But it's
Co-responder.
co-respond. Okay.
C-O-R-E, yeah.
C-O-R-E, okay.
Was
Co-responder.
the thinking there that, like, was it a color of money type of thing where they feel like maybe DHS should be covered in mental health while HUD should be covering housing? Like, well,
I have no
I agree with you.
idea. I have no idea because, I think different ideologies view mental health and mental illness differently. And, in conversations I've had, so I have a son who's diagnosed with autism and schizophrenia, and he has done time in San Carlos Correctional Facility. That has been very hard. And looking at going through the system with him, he's diagnosed with autism, he's diagnosed with schizophrenia. And when he was in one facility and they're just giving him drugs just to sedate him. And then when he moved from one facility to the other facility, that care didn't come. They just stopped giving him the drugs and okay, there you go. Then I'm trying to contact my health insurance provider to get him here. Oh, well, we have an appointment out in 6 weeks. So in the meantime, he's wreaking havoc in our lives for himself, and adding that layer that he was also addicted to drugs. So what I'm seeing in this work is so much of what we as family have been dealing with on a day-to-day. And there were so many layers that what got him to there. And it intersected with how he handled school, how he handled interacting with police officers, even with me running down the street with a chancla. And I'm get in the house. And, so all of it.
There you go.
So, it was all the things. And there wasn't one single avenue. There were several things that had to have happened for us to be able to make this work, for us to be able to support him and for him to be able to help himself. So I think when I speak with individuals, even some of my opponents that have run in the past, that, mental health is here, housing's here, they're all in different silos. And I'm like, that is not how the human brain works. And so those are the things that I really, as an elected official, I want to make sure that our, people higher up or people in other offices understand that you cannot expect to have policing without having the capacity to support drug addiction, mental illness, domestic violence, all those things.
It's very similar. When we have like a natural disaster and you have to stand up an emergency operations center, you have police, fire, medical, all sitting around the table because it's so related.
Yes.
So it's the same thing.
It's the same thing.
You need to have the practitioners who can do their part and who understand their discipline, able to put their resources together to try to solve it.
Yes. And so I think that is something that we as a region can, with force, be able to advocate. We need this. We need, that the support of mental illness. We need recovery resources and continuity of care. So when an individual moves from one facility to another, or from one shelter to another or get into housing, that continuity of care, that person follows.
Mhm.
And, you know, what was sad is that we actually didn't get that for him until he went to San Carlos prison. Because then he was meeting in group therapy 4 times a week and meeting with a private therapist 3 times a week. And when he was out, it was, oh, we'll meet you 6 weeks out or 4 or in another month.
Capacity driven, you think?
What's that?
Capacity driven by the providers?
Yes, yeah. And that's, you know, that's it. And so I think, you know, by having systems like Core and Needs and the Angel Initiative, we can ensure, and, you know, we're still working through gaps. There are still gaps, but ensuring that continuity is there. And wow, we've recently approved a new data. So we've gotten grant funding for a new data program that will allow us to be able, you know, organizations or agencies to connect and to make sure we're not creating duplication of services. So we're able to allocate those services to in the right places.
So really quick, Heidi, Susie, what I've got for you is advocacy on advocate for state and federal policy to support mental health funding as the
Mental
advocacy.
and recovery resources. Yes.
That's the other one I got written down. And then the support services was continuity of care.
Continuity of care. Yes.
Continuity of care.
Yes.
And then the creation, did you have any defined creation of?
Oh, so I think about what we're doing through our housing authority. So we have, you know, the Zinnia. So it's modeled after the Dolores Project and
Supportive.
so that's permanent supportive housing through the suites. Ascent, which is through our LHA. And it's providing more family, so family affordable housing, so larger 3 and 4 bedroom apartments spaces. Village on Main for senior, and then house pad, so that attainable housing. So and our house pad, which is the property that's going to be built adjacent to our hospital, is providing permanently attainable housing, so that people can purchase. So opportunities for people to purchase affordable housing and that missing middle. So offering those variety of housing types, or and you know, doing it through our Longmont Housing Authority, or even just amendments that we, you know, ordinances that we've changed to allow for lower cost. Creation of lower cost to build construction homes so they can. And then supportive services, it's that connection with, you know, our nonprofits like Hope and Recovery Cafe, and making sure that we're able to continue that collaboration and financial support. So,
Okay. Thank you. Heidi?
I just wanted to make just a quick notation, and I hear you, counselor or council member. Sorry, I just went to court all of a sudden. That, you know, it is frustrating, and I think that there has been some big movements on the state side recently. There is another, in addition to the 1115 Medicaid waiver we've talked about for the support services, there's an additional Medicaid waiver that is about to turn on probably sooner than that one, which is the 90-day turning on Medicaid pre-release from institutional settings. And so happy to provide some information on that. I think that I think the state is starting to recognize how everything is interconnected. And I know, having conversations with Division of Housing leadership, which we all saw last week at the housing conference, they recognize it from a systems perspective. So happy to send that stuff over, because I think that's one of those less known 1115 waivers that people aren't talking about unless you're connected to Department of Corrections.
Commissioner, I'm just doing a time check for you. We had a break scheduled at this time, and I know this is a good discussion that you haven't gotten through yet, so that's me checking in on time check. I do have the lines notes.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I think we keep moving in this conversation, if that's okay with everybody. And if you need to move, grab food or anything else, feel free. Yeah. With that. Any questions for Susie? Okay. And we'll
the goal is we're gonna have a discussion after we hear everybody's thoughts. So, yeah.
I'm Jen Cowish from Superior. Not who I am. So I think the biggest thing for me is, I don't know if you guys know this, but in Superior, they don't think that there's housing issues anywhere. So that's a big point of contention for me, and just educating my own community about the fact that we have 40% of our community are renters, and they're actually, we are the ones contributing to the kinds of things that you mentioned about how you absorb a lot of it, but the other people aren't helping. My words, not yours, but so that is a big piece. We recently did a housing survey, and a lot of the feedback was extremely disheartening. People saying, why are you wasting money on this? We don't have housing problems. People can go somewhere else. I mean, literally horrible things that were said. And so what we've decided to do, because we have such a large apartment, Bell Flatirons is a large apartment complex area, is to just specifically target them to get feedback about what their experience in terms of rent increases, and that those are the people we want information from, and we didn't get it from them. We got information from people that are living in $1 million house that make 6 figures.
That's paid 200 for it.
Yes. That too. So on the local, I think for us, the state would be tied in somewhere in there, because I imagine what will come from that is what I would like to see as a creation for rental assistance, because as many people as we keep in those apartments and housing there don't then fall over into Boulder County needs. So I think that would tie in with the state. And we did just recently approve a development for a senior affordable housing, which is literally the first affordable housing in Superior that is like a whole development. I mean, I think we had 2 units before the fire, and they were lost in the fire, that were just individual affordable housing. So this is a big deal. We got, there's some pushback from the community on that. So, but it's done, like it's been approved, and they'll start. So I'm really anxious to see that as a model for that education piece of there actually are seniors who can't afford to stay here, and this is the middle housing that they need. And but that will take time. Another thing for us on the mental health piece is we're hiring another co-responder, because we found that to be really helpful in terms of addressing, any kind of mental health issues that come up. We're about to start a comprehensive plan, and I think for me, just personally, there's a big generalization from Superior people that like we don't have any land and it's not our. We do have land, and I think the comprehensive plan needs to identify the land that is actually available for building, so that we can dispel that narrative that people keep saying. That's, I think, just a NIMBY cover that works nicely for them. Another area, I think, just like the scouring of our policies for anti-housing, like it's in there, it's like baked in, and I know it's in there, and I've come across some things that I think would just be, it may end up being just a personal project for me, but it's part of that re-education at a local level that we have created policy that inhibits people from housing in our area. We do also have the 12% commitment to the county, but that was initiated several years ago, and I just, until we approved the senior housing, I just felt like that was the job.
Was your counseling committee of the belief that the market will just cause the affordable houses to show up? So why do anything about it other than set a goal? We had that happen.
I think that the goal was intended, and also to be a contributing part of this region and not be the one city that didn't say, oh, we're in on this too.
Gotcha.
But I think it was made, and I just want to say I wasn't on the council when we made this, but I think it was made under it's tied to, we can also be like, we don't have land. So to me, it felt like, well, don't make it then. Like, don't make the commitment. Like, say what you're really gonna do is to say we don't have land. So don't make a commitment like this. Be honest about it. But I think
we've got more staff that is focused more on how do we find the places to put the housing versus before it was kind of like, well, the residents don't want it there. They don't want it there. We go somewhere. So, yeah, things are shifting. I think in the last 5 years since COVID, our community has changed a lot with people moving there that weren't from there. And the people who bought in the 90s are aging out and moving away. So the whole fabric of the community is changing where people are coming in with more openness to policies that are going to be supportive, more inclusionary. But yeah. And then also the 1B, I mean, that's the question all the time is like, I hear from other board members, it's, we don't know what that's gonna look like. So what can we do with a question mark? Because we don't know yet and would want to make sure that we're part of that conversation and allocation.
Thank you. Any questions for Jane?
We can go next.
Okay, Erie?
So I'm gonna take, so this is MJ Adams. She's amazing. None of you can have it. Some of the things that she's initiated, I'm gonna brag on her a little bit. So we were part of the 12% goal. We signed up to that about 2 years before I joined the council. We had not done anything intentional about affordable housing since 1999. That's when we built 12 affordable housing. We built 12 units of senior housing and then stopped. There was more space, but we ran out of money. The town was much smaller. But in the comprehensive plans, at least 3 of them since that time, housing affordability was listed as something that needed to be done. There was a period of time where the Erie Town Council was entirely made up of realtors and brokers. And they believed strongly that the market would provide. Just let the builders build. If you can outpace the demand, then if the supply can outpace the demand, the price will naturally come down. They did say we want smaller lot sizes. We want smaller setbacks on the sides of the houses so you can build them a little closer together. They did not anticipate that we would be voted #1 place to raise a family in 2017, and you would start getting 5,000 square foot houses on very small lots. That's what happened. So we have patio homes that are $1 million. So the price has gotten outrageous. And due to MJ's innovation, knowing that to get any of the Prop 123 grant money, we were going to need to speed up our review process for development applications. You need to get from application to permit in 90 days. And so she worked with our planning and development department. They were able to change that process to make it a little faster. And also, this part surprised me. They put a incentive for developers. If you have, I think it's 12% now, we might change it later, but if you have a certain percentage of permanently affordable housing in your PD, you get a staff review. You don't have to go to the planning commission and you don't have to go through. And the reason that the benefit there is you don't get to skirt any rules. You still have all the same UDC requirements, but you don't have to wait 30 to 90 days to get put on the agenda and kind of wait your time. Almost immediately, developments started coming to us with, I'll give you 230 units. I'll give you 50 units. Because that savings of money from the time was a motivator to them. I didn't realize how much that would motivate them. Add to that, we dedicated a lot of ARPA dollars to purchasing land that we could dedicate to projects to do development. The first one was 2.5 acres or so, the Cheeseman Street project, Cheeseman Street residences. I don't like saying project anymore, talking about affordable housing, it's not projects. Sorry. So 35 townhomes for sale. We already broke ground on them. So within 2 years, we went from, I'd like to see a shovel in the ground to, oh, we bought this land, we've got this partner, RFP's been awarded, we've broken ground, and there'll be people moving in a year or so. Not a huge dent compared to what's going on in some of the other places, but for us, that was 191% increase in our housing, affordable housing stock. We also bought 40 acres near our old town off the creek. Half of it's going to be open space, which everyone in Erie supports. That's the number one thing that's supported. The other half, we use ARPA dollars to make up the difference of what our trails fund couldn't pay for. And so the other half is going to be affordable housing. And so we essentially, we were fortunate enough that Erie had a lot of people who were working from home during COVID. And so when we got those ARPA funds, we did do some incentives to help our businesses stay afloat. We didn't lose any restaurants during COVID. In fact, most of them did better during COVID. Everyone shopped on Amazon, so we got lots of sales taxes too. That, and then we also, did a little bit for our first responders who were having to work through COVID. But about 85% of our ARPA dollars or more went to land acquisition. And so we purchased land is the most expensive element of the development where we are. So by purchasing land, being willing to dedicate that to projects, changing our processes around the development reviews and giving what turns into a fiscal incentive to the developers to just move faster, that's causing projects to just come to us naturally. I think the first one, which this came from a developer who was staunchly opposed to anything that was, that smelled like a inclusionary housing ordinance. They purchased 500 acres from the state land bank. They wanted to put 2,300 homes on it or 2,300 units. And immediately they were like, oh, we'll give you 240 of those affordably. So I think if you can find sweet spots like that motivate developers to make projects happen. You've got the sports stadium with that huge field of what was supposed to be residences all in front of it. It never got built. I mean, there's probably things you can do that if you're people like MJ, not MJ, but people like MJ who work for you, if they
We stole it from.
Yes.
They stole it to Richie.
Oh, okay. All right. Fair exchange. So if you can kind of sit down with maybe some industry partners to like talk through like, okay, what's your pet peeve? What's your motivator? And for us, if they have a $300 million project that's waiting 90 days, that's a lot of interest. So if moving faster makes them, if it gets them off the dime, you'd be surprised what they'll sacrifice to make it work.
We did the same change in our land code.
Yeah.
To streamline that process for people who are building on site.
And to be honest, that change that we made was really because we couldn't get through our own process in 90 days.
Yeah.
So we're like, oh, well, it works for us and it follows the rules. Oh, by the way, if it works for everybody else too, go for it. So just some thoughts. Yes, things seem to be working. And we have the same thing where we had 2,000 people a year. We had 600 houses a year, and those are average homes are 850,000. These people are coming from out of state. They're moving to more progressive areas. They're moving from places that have services and have affordable housing. So to them, they think it's already here. They don't know that nobody has affordable. And then we have business owners who can't support their full hours of service. The stores are closing early because they don't have staff. They don't have a manager to manage the teenagers. So they're like, okay, well, I can't be open. And that inconveniences the people who are moving to the area. And once you can explain the connective tissue between the businesses who need the workers who need a place to live, you connect those three, that can convince some people. And then when you explain your kid is going to graduate from college, they're going to make $90,000 a year. They're going to move in your basement because they can't afford a house or an apartment. And then that motivates the rest of them.
Thank you. I heard advocate for local policy change.
Absolutely.
Actually, I mean, those are all great topics, and I would add
Those
to
are all MJ's ideas.
Into a football field, all I had to do was catch the ball and run it over there.
well, dream team. I would add zoning as well. You know, for those of us who don't have a lot of land to develop, what we're learning is a lot of our zoning policies were rooted in historic mindsets, including the single family dwelling, large lots. So that's one of the things as well that we're looking at is how can we proactively rezone in order to attract developers to build out those lots. So I think that ties into what you.
We're actually that's a central topic to our election right now. It was a central topic to the comprehensive plan, which we just passed. We've been working on for 5 years. Erie's in a 44 square mile planning area, but we've only annexed 22 square miles of it. But even of the remaining 22 square miles, only 2 haven't been, you know, what's the word for, sorry, entitled in some way. So there's not many places that we can put higher density residences, but we're 90% single family, 90% owner occupied. And these are a recipe for really high rent when you do get rentals. I think the cheapest 1 bedroom we have is 1950, something like that. And it's like 600 square feet. So we are attempting to put higher density, so medium and high density, near highway corridors, near transportation, those types of things. There are some rubs though, because there are some of the older subdivisions that were single family homes that were near those highways that were also along what used to be rural buffer zones between towns. And those buffer zones are now gone. Those IGAs expired, weren't renewed, whatever. Sometimes there's businesses that are put between them. Sometimes there's apartments that are put between them. And so now you have people who felt like in 2002, they moved to the outskirts of Boulder. The realtor said that was open space. No one's ever going to build there. So they feel like they moved just over 287 to what was rural, and it was a quiet single family residence neighborhood. And now you want to put an apartment next door. And so if we can adequately restructure traffic flow to make their lives a little easier, because it's jamming up right now. It's kind of choking on all the new everything that came to the area. So if you can ease their mind by doing your infrastructure planning with roads and drainage, those are 2 main issues we ran into, then you might be able to get them to be a little more amenable to higher density. Another thing that very much helped us, we did a lot of pop-up events with the public, and we showed pictures of what the different density types look like. Because when you tell a layperson 20 dwelling units per acre, they're like, one, I don't even know what an acre looks like. My house is on a postage stamp. What's that? So we did a lot of, here's notionally what it could look like. And that calmed some people. And then in Erie, if you get over 3 stories, you panic some folks. So anything over like 25 dwelling units per acre is usually like a 4th story. And so that can make people nervous because they think they're going to lose their sight line to the mountains. So, but although you guys have higher buildings, I think over your way.
Okay, I'm gonna interject.
Sure.
Thank you.
I'm rambling, sorry.
We're not gonna get to the, like, how do we do it if we don't decide what we're doing? So thank you.
Were there any questions?
The how in that is jargon does not help the layperson. You need to make sure they understand what you're talking about. What does density mean? What does it look like? What is it going to mean for me? Is it going to mean a ton more people? Is it going to mean a ton more traffic?
Yes and yes.
Actually, no, it may not. If you have a 6-bedroom house, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have 6 people living in it. But if you have 6 units of apartments, you might have 5 people living in it. But if it's right off of the bus corridor, one of those people might not have a car. So there are ways to educate people about what you're talking about. And you can win some over it. Some you'll never get. Some will say, no, I want everything to be a single family residence.
I'm just gonna add in a little bit. What I hear consistently from the leadership in town is we're better regionally than we are as an individual community. And I hear it constantly in the work that I'm doing is to support and participate very actively and be at the table around regional conversations around housing, the whole spectrum of it. And that the unit creation is critically important. They're very committed to the 12%. Remind me almost every meeting I have a conversation with them about, they say, how close are we to the 12%? And that the critical importance that our public safety recognizes the services that the larger communities provide, that we could never provide them at the same level in Erie, but are recognize the critical importance of having those resources, those services available, and being at the table and supportive of those services being available.
Right. Who else do we have besides me, Boulder County, and then Lions?
Yeah, it was super quick from Lions. Do you want me to report out? So
Yeah, thank you.
You guys are taking the butt.
Tanya and Holly were apologetic that they couldn't make it tonight. So they sent a quick email. It's very short. The Board of Trustees of Lions supported the Y mission statement. They are aligned with all 3 of these actions and with the regional approach, and specifically felt like regional advocacy helpful. That's basically what we got to Lions and share.
Okay, thank you. And I did meet with Mayor Rogan on Friday and encouraged them when they're all back together. To look at maybe defining whichever one of those might be a priority, when they have an opportunity. And then Christina, was that you?
Somebody had a hand up.
I thought I saw a hand up too.
It's me,
No, it's Nicole.
Nicole
Oh,
from
okay.
Lafayette.
Let's hear it.
I thought I saw like a flash for a second. Are you?
Still
Are you
here.
still
Can you hear? Can you hear me?
Yeah. Thank
Okay.
you.
So, yeah, interesting enough, Lafayette, I think, is a little bit different than Erie. We're built out a little bit more. And so we are kind of working on what the rest of the council had said, being resourceful, and they wanted to add that to this. Instead of taking on, here's my opinion, or they were not talking about the 3 Ys into action here individually, but they said overall, we really think that they feel like success is being resourceful, using our resources the best we can. So what they are saying, to keep people housed, that was the thing, keep people housed. They really believe in the collaborative approach. I think what they were referring to were things like, with Willoughby Corner, Lafayette purchased the land thanks to Boulder County giving us a loan, working with Boulder housing partners. Also, the collaboration between Erie and Erie sending us for that project, the private activity bonds, that they were saying this, as you all said, a regional approach or a collaborative approach is truly how you have to do it, because no one city can do it alone. But the resourceful also was trying to use everything you can. They were talking about, we have a health and human services tax like Boulder. And so that has now been most recently turned into a grant program to help support the nonprofits in our community. So it comes together with what Boulder is doing, so that the nonprofits can continue to do, as we talked, it says in this bullet, provide supportive services on improving housing. They also talked about, I heard earlier, about lessons learned from co-responders and how do we work with, even though co-responders are working with the police, but that does all play a role. So being able to look at this in a very holistic approach is what they were saying, is that that's how they feel when they look at these three things. How is it we are going to make this happen? And how are we going to achieve success?
Thank you. Any questions? Feel free. Right. I'm gonna share what, we talked about Boulder County, and we were looking at these pieces and trying to figure out what's like, how can we narrow that in? How can we define any or all of them? So we tried to stick to two. And so where I'm like just thinking about all the conversations that we hear around housing, and I say that and then I don't have my document by me. A couple different pieces. If you think about, and if you're able, Heidi, just to put up that first picture that's listed on there, it's harder to see that, but here's what I hear a bunch about is, if you can scroll it down just a little bit, thank you, you're amazing. That like these people that are in this is the 2-story home, it has a garage, it's got a basement. We have seniors who are like out, they don't need this much space. We have people who are dealing with property taxes. We have people who are dealing with homeowner insurance, like all the things. And when we talk about preventing homelessness, most people in this country are like $400 away in an emergency of a car or health. Somebody already talked about healthcare, from losing their home. So what we're trying to figure out is what would be the advocacy option to try and address one of these issues. So what could we do with that in those types of situations? Again, trying to focus on one piece. So here's my advocacy idea. That's not all of it. It's just advocacy on, you're fine to keep going, advocacy at a federal level collectively on a temporary reduction of capital gains tax. That's a congressional move. I get it. It's federal work. And like regionally, what could we do and how could we address? To me, that issue that we have about housing is in inventory. Entry level homes typically are a condo, a townhome, or a smaller single family home. The difference between 2020 and 2024 is an entry level home in Boulder County is $500,000. Not in each town, or not in Boulder as an example, but countywide. So if we could figure out a way to look at all vacant or lightly used homes, which just means somebody's not there all the time. So it's a secondary home or an investment home. And really look at a smaller piece of folks, people in 2020 and 2021 weren't able to evict in Colorado, even though people weren't paying rent. Smaller landlords at that time were trying to figure out how to get rid of their properties because it was just too much there was too much happening. But we didn't have a mechanism. So if we were able to move that into
The idea is that the investors who want out but are afraid of the tax implications, they would.
this is like, what can we create to allow people to do that? So if you can keep moving there. And the other piece about this that I love is it's climate friendly because we're not focusing on building. We're not focusing on construction. We're not fighting the high density conversation. We're not fighting the building code, all the other pieces. So if you look at, I'm catching up to her. So this is like this is me. This is like the most basic person putting together. Sale of vacant property. This would only be for one time. It's a temporary situation. So let's say 18 months. One time, so you can't sell all your 5 properties. One property to get a reduction on capital gains tax. Max sales price would be $500,000. So if you have a secondary home that's a $1.5 million home in Boulder, it doesn't apply to you. And it would be limited to small landlords. So we could argue about the number and get to something. But in this case, if we said it's anybody who owns less than 10 properties. It could be 5, it could be 7, we could moving to a new homeowner, my interest is always going to be around homeownership. It's always going to be about prioritizing people who want to live and work in their communities. So like, how do you put all these pieces together to favor that person? That's where a local and state ordinance would come in. That would create an ordinance where collectively we would all say in Boulder County for the next 18 months, connected with this, you can only buy if you are going to live or work in the area. Just like our housing authorities right now have you on a tier. If you already work in Boulder, then you get higher on the list when there's an affordable housing. So we have all these mechanisms in different places. And then obviously this is just one tiny little slice of how do we try and look for ways for people to stay in the house. So that's one. The second one that is more around, like, it's under the creation of affordable housing, but like a very specific piece. How do we identify, some of you were talking about it kind of in the mix. How do we identify and remove zoning barriers to backyard cottage and or accessory dwelling units in Boulder? Like if we regionally just focused on that, just looked at all the zoning. Some people talk about this as incremental housing, because if you go back to that 2-story house, like what's the solution? Put in a duplex, like make a duplex out of the house. It's finding some way to get another accessory dwelling unit on there, or use that like a mini apartment. But you're using parcels and lots that already exist. So we're not fighting about the construction. We're not trying to find developable land somewhere. We're not dealing with all the other arguments. So if you can scroll down to the next one. So that one is just a very basic backyard cottage that a lot of our areas in the county, throughout the county. There's a lot of different restrictions. There's restrictions connected to HOAs that we would have to address, but that could be a really good regional program to address the new legislation that we have, but there are barriers within the new legislation based on our HOAs. The shell for this cottage cost $5,000. So here's like, if we talked about just focused on backyard cottage, some of the questions then would be like, what areas for us to work on collectively? What areas are restricted from having the cottage? Like that's the simplest question. We could review overlays of mapping to find gaps or opportunities per city, per town, per county. What opportunities exist with new housing legislation that I was just talking about, and where are those barriers? And then what would we need to do collectively to really work at a state level to remove those HOA barriers that we have in Colorado? So those are the two.
Another local thing I've seen municipalities kind of debate over, struggle with ADUs is how do you handle the related impact fees and tap fees? So if you're going to have a different water meter on
Particularly
the
for fire
ADU,
sprinklers.
well, you have that too, right? So how do you make it not prohibitively expensive from an impact fee standpoint for those ADUs while also being equitable and fair to, people who are building single family homes, right? So if you're going to build a 500 square foot ADU, should you pay the same impact fee of a 5,000 square foot single family home? So there's some thoughts you have to put around that, and there's legal requirements around how your enterprise funds set manage your impact fees. So that's one that we're chewing on, honestly, because we would like to provide more ADUs, but we want to make sure we're not being unfair to the others. Or do you allow the ADU, since it's so small, to just ride on the water tap for the existing home?
And finding ways to do that, because like, for instance, house behind a house, a lot of places you have to have a sprinkler system for that, and you can't feed that on a typical system often on the tap that's there.
Yeah.
There are ways around that if codes allow for
Right.
systems that are typically only allowed for commercial and things like that.
Yeah, and I think just like, those would be the questions, right? What are all the different requirements? City of Longmont has.
That's a great question.
Go ahead. You can read it because I can't see it.
Does anyone know where the legislation landed on the ADU policy from last session? I was asking the same question. I couldn't remember where it ended. I thought it passed, but I'm not sure.
I thought so too, but I feel like it got super gutted and there was a lot of unanswered questions, so I can't recall the details.
I thought it says something along the lines of HOAs can no longer prevent you from having an ADU, but that doesn't necessarily mean you get building permit for it. So
It's actually surprising. But restrictions are heavy.
yeah,
There's limits, and then the HOA doesn't let you, so that was helpful, but I think it's, you have to have them, but they get to define what you're allowed to do, which.
It's actually a regional group. I think Lisa's involved in it, or Ally from our office is involved in it, talking about the legislation and what it means, how to sort through.
She's gonna update us all on that. We've been
They
talking.
just met this afternoon.
I saw her this evening, so.
Yeah. Well, and I
Oh,
think the
there's-
other piece around incremental housing development is it doesn't have to be ADU. And I think everybody's mind goes over, it doesn't have to be a detached ADU. But if you have a bi-level home
yeah.
or a 2 or 3 story home, and I just walked through a past client's house on Wednesday night last week because they're about to lose their home because they have medical situations that are really extreme. But if you can get the lot approved, it's totally set up to put a door in the middle and then create an exit, and you have a a main suite on both levels. Like those are the things that people,
We have
like, how do we educate people?
walkout basements, they make it basement.
Yeah.
Right, so I just want to say, it doesn't have to be like a separate detached piece.
Yeah.
Like, how do you do a mini apartment that would literally allow a senior to stay in their home who's on a fixed income? So those are a lot of what we hear about, like, how do we make solutions for those types of properties? To allow people to stay in Boulder County.
I feel like most of the solutions in Superior that come up get immediately squashed by safety, egress, how do we get in and out after the fire? And I recognize it's been almost 3 years that some people are, it's a convenient response. That doesn't have merit in some areas, but in others, there definitely is a need. So when we get to when you create higher density, how you address and this is a later thing, I'm sure, but just the roads themselves to carry the amount of people in
You
and out.
have less people now, because a lot of people were having trouble getting funding or permits to rebuild, right? Did your population get
We're
out?
like 70% rebuilt.
Okay,
There's some empty lots, but most of those were purchased by people that are gonna rebuild or build new for them if they bought the lots.
Sure.
It's very hard to parse what's real and what's fear and perceived or potentially manipulated fear, at this point, so. All right, so here's what we are at 7:05. We are not having another meeting.
We've answered the last question.
I'm gonna
And
suggest we also carry on. Because I feel like now we're starting to get some momentum. We're kind of like cracking that iceberg and.
yeah,
Go ahead.
no, I think that, so I just want to check in with folks. Christina, do you want to share what that deadline is about?
Yeah, I just put it in the chat as well. So it gives a definition of a subject jurisdiction to allow an administrative approval process. And so if we're looking at this kind of approach, we would have to have something into the Department of Local Affairs by June 30th, 2025 to qualify as a supportive jurisdiction. So yeah, I put a link to the House bill into the chat above. And so that might be something for a future group, a future meeting to look at, or, maybe we review this in between meetings?
Thank you.
Mhm.
Here's our two options right now. We have 24 minutes. So we can take a break and stretch. We can and come back, and I think what we need to do is decide which actions we're gonna work on. Is it gonna be, how are we defining that advocacy with everybody's conversation on ideas? How are we defining the creation of affordable housing? How are we defining the creation of support services? I think we need to get through that tonight. And then I do think we have another meeting to then decide what are the next steps? What is this group doing? So do people feel like they need to stretch for a minute, or do you wanna? No, but there's cold water in the south. Do we need a cup for you?
I'll find some cups for you.
And I can listen while you guys are in that water.
Water.
Thank you.
I lied, that was it. What are y'all thinking?
I'm finding power in 3 to 7:30 tonight.
Yeah, I got about 30 minutes left in.
We're going to. Maybe what I might need is because I didn't get everything in the slide while people were talking, they're all in notes. So
That was what the 10 minutes was. Take all of the stuff from your notes.
I know, and we ran out through, which is right through. So here's what I'm gonna do. Let's focus on the advocacy one. And I'm gonna, Heidi or Jana, I'm gonna need one of you or Susanna to type into the shared PowerPoint. And I can read off what I've got here for advocacy for each city town. Does that work, everybody? And that'll give everybody, so what we are gonna do is we are gonna focus on advocacy right now. We're gonna look at everybody's thoughts, ideas, and we're gonna make a decision. Okay. So we have advocacy as advocacy for funding. We have advocacy to find more funding mechanisms. Advocacy as determine gaps to collectively make precise asks. We have advocacy of mental health and recovery resources. I can see it on mine, so she may just have to stop sharing for a minute and then
I think stop sharing your share.
and then we'll see if it'll show, because I can see it on my side. And then advocacy at state level for rental assistance. And then we had local zoning and policy change.
Just to, as I understood, to incentivize private building. That's what creation of.
I was in the, so each, I think it could help regionally to advocate for municipalities to review their development review process as a mechanism for incentivizing industry innovation in terms of providing affordable housing. And I think that, like, again, I'd like to say we planned it that way, but we really were just trying to be able to meet the Prop 123 timeline. And we uncovered that it was like manna for developers. So, and we might actually have to dial back a bit what we might have to raise the level of inclusion, but I think for us, it worked immediately. So I think that other municipalities, as you guys are thinking through how you're gonna meet the 123 guideline, think about that approach.
So it's the advocacy, local zoning and policy changes that, is that captured right here?
Yeah,
And everybody's gonna have.
it was less zoning, more just actually, yeah, so not necessarily zoning. Just the review your development review process and timeline. And try to find ways to make it faster. And the incentive for making it faster is to voluntarily include some minimum level of affordable housing. So zoning is a separate thing. You're always gonna have to go have a public hearing for zoning, so please don't try to avoid skipping that part. You'll kill affordable housing if you do that, but yeah, that would be my advice. And we're happy to share a copy of what we did. It may not work for you, but you can.
We did something.
Yeah.
Sure what.
I was trying to type it in, it didn't work, sorry. Advocacy. Federal advocacy of temporary reduction on capital gains tax. So for those of you, if you've been, I'm hoping everybody knows which one theirs is. The question is, do you want to change yours to local, state, or federal? You don't have to, but I just want to ask so that because we're going to start talking about them each now.
Sure. Yes, in the ADU one, you had some advocacy as well. So it'd be HOA, there was related to HOA restrictions at state level and consistency across the region. Do you want that under the advocacy one, or it could go on recreation. I'm just asking.
Yeah, the HOA, yes, please.
You had mentioned, I think it was in your second point, around preference for new home ownership. Giving preference to people who work.
Advocacy for
Was that
local and state ordinances that
Yes.
prioritize
that?
owner occupancy.
That's exactly what we're doing with HousePad. So because that was a public-private partnership, we are giving preference to Longmont employees.
Right.
For, and I think that, the word is preference, it's not, because it's not first right of refusal anymore. We don't say that, right?
It depends what your transaction is, but
Yeah, I think it just sounded,
preference sounds.
preference is the preferred term, okay? So that's, yes. And so looking at those options, so I'm talking with the school district as well, looking at school district property. What are some ways that maybe we can enter in an intergovernmental agreement for creation of homes for purchase of lower income and attainable housing for our classified staff, for bus drivers, that would give preference to district and city employees. So kind of looking at different ways that we can leverage what land we have left.
This is a healthy list. So I don't necessarily want to add to it, but I've learned that churches don't have the same zoning rules that everyone else does. And so in some parts of the state, there are churches that are voluntarily putting affordable housing projects on their land.
We do that in Longmont.
Yeah.
Yeah. We do.
Okay.
But that's good.
We
Let's
need,
expand that
we need to
out.
learn from that. Yeah. So we can do that. We don't have a lot of big churches.
Okay. Really quick, I asked a question that I didn't give anyone a chance to respond. Is it on the slide up there? Find more funding mechanisms, for example, is that local, state, or federal? Or is that just,
I think that's what we've been trying to figure out, where can we get more?
At least state and federal, we want to people's money.
Right.
Yeah, state and.
but I mean, just to define it, I think is really helpful. That'd be good. So that, yes.
Yeah, federal, state, federal.
I would argue for local as well. And the reason I say that is it's very difficult to create affordable housing unless you have the local funds. Even if you get the state funds, the federal funds. The deal,
Yeah, you're right.
the deal doesn't work unless you have local funds. And that's why the 1D is such an incredible opportunity, because it does create some of that local funding. But I don't know, not to.
Well, and I'm learning right now about special assessments and the way that a city or town can do their own special assessments instead of trying to get subsidized funds from other places.
Yeah, I think local could mean a lot of things. Like
Yeah.
we're also looking at a vacant home tax or various other, like there are lots of different kinds of funding mechanisms around.
Okay, so that one's all, which is fine. I just wanna, I'm just trying to help us narrow down the work. And I'm fine if it's, like I said last time, if it's 10 things, that's okay too. Okay, determine gaps to collectively make precise asks.
Yeah, I mean, I think the gap, identifying the gaps is a local thing, like
Yeah.
what gaps do we have in our services? But I think that
Is that under advocacy are probably?
well, to me, it was a means to the end of to advocate better for ourselves.
Yeah.
It's information that it would help us if we had in order to win more of these grants that we go after or various other kinds of, as we make arguments around potentially state and federal funding also.
If you opted into Prop 123, you have to do a housing needs assessment,
Yeah, we did.
which will inform you on what you need to advocate for, so. At least it did for us.
We did that, and then we got all of the wealthy homeowners that said there's not hospitals.
So.
Well, your consultant should have, well, not a housing needs survey, it was because you should have a consultant that says, here's the percentage of what you have and here's what you don't have. We found that 75% of our residents are housing distressed, even though they're in their homes.
House rich.
Yeah. Yep.
There's also the Dr. Cog Regional Housing Needs Assessment.
Is that what I'm thinking of? Maybe that's. It does a community by community assessment about what your need is.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was,
The middle.
Yeah.
That was
I have unavailable resources.
Missing.
So I think that that's, it's also not just gaps in the housing, but gaps in the services too.
oh, yeah.
So so my question is.
So it would
can be
probably be more, I think my council is thinking about the Dr. Cog survey around housing and how that has helped with identifying some of those gaps, but wanting a more similar thing related to services.
So, and it can be both. Is this for the advocacy or is this for supportive services? It's for both.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking service.
Okay, I'm trying to keep us on advocacy, but I want to make sure. Okay, so is that determine local gaps in supportive services to collectively make precise asks? Is that right for this one? On advocacy? It can be, I'm just trying to make sure I didn't think it is both.
Yeah, I mean-
Type it wrong when I started.
No, that it was our intention to ask for that under advocacy. That is where.
I have now captured it in both places.
We did kind of have similar asks that are both advocacy and services.
Okay, here's my goal right now, because it's 7:20. If we can, because like Jen and Susanna and I and Heidi can like put these all together and like come back and we can like wordsmith them and like it, because I'm typing them, but I don't know for sure if I'm getting it the way that people are saying it. I'm not typing now, Jen's typing now, but I was taking notes. So but do we think we can get through advocacy and make a commitment on advocacy tonight? Or do people feel like maybe we should come back together and do all of them together now that you have an idea of what people are talking about. The share outs, we could ask Lions for a little bit more versus just we agree with all of it. Well, as a suggestion, or you could go back to your groups, your councils and boards now and say, here's some of the examples, here's what we're hearing. Do you want to define yours anymore? I just want to ask the group.
I like that, the last one. I think it would be helpful to have this to say, this is what we're looking at, we're figuring out where these fits and we're headed. Is there anything you want to add or not okay with?
May I make a process suggestion? Because I'm always good at giving homework. Have the councils rank order within this group. Where they believe your community priorities are, and then we can see whether there's alignment across the cities and towns and county. What do you think of that? As a process suggestion. So maybe if we could spend the rest of our time capturing these bullet items, the other two places, and then that would be the homework assignment that y'all get back.
I think that's great. Is that okay?
And we'll break them like 1 through however many there are.
However many there are here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, this list, for example. Knowing that you're gonna have to prioritize your time, and maybe 7 is too much to do, you might at your next meeting settle in on the top couple.
Yeah.
I mean,
Is that what you think?
What's that?
way in the next 2 weeks.
Oh.
Sorry. It's just- Maybe it's not before the election.
Oh.
To not complicate things.
Yeah, we could get this out to you quickly. Okay, thank you for
They could have a
that.
special election, right? They didn't make it.
How about under creation? Did you get somebody you want me to capture notes in the creation?
Well, I just want to make sure on advocacy that, was there any other additions to the either local, state and federal? Was there, like, was one of these just local or versus state or anything else that you want to capture before we go to the next?
Just local. Which of these are just local?
Are any of them
Mental
just?
health and recovery services, I think is.
Yeah.
That's state, local.
Local, state and federal.
I know local development is completely local.
Yeah.
Mental health and recovery services, I can see that, yeah,
In all.
state as well. And federal.
Okay, any other additions? Okay. Yeah.
Commissioner,
Yes, of course, thank you.
may I ask a clarifying question?
Of course.
So state level funding for rental assistance, the state already allocates like half of 123 to rental assistance, but they manage that. Is the ask to expand that money? Or make it more accessible to local governments?
Great question.
I can clarify, so I think I said that, it's just, we don't have any kind of rental assistance. And I don't know anything about how our municipality incentivizes or promotes or provides some kind of rental assistance locally. That might not be a thing, or might be, I don't, we do it for businesses, and so like, how do we keep people in
You
the
do tips
housing?
for business.
But that might be redundant if they have access to state already, like,
Flatirons isn't it?
I don't know. At first. I don't know.
Flatirons is Superior Roof.
Flatirons is the first. That's right. It's very.
Yeah, so Superior residents would get that through Sister Farm.
Correct. Through where? Sister Farm.
Yeah, it's just Boulder County funds the rental assistance program for them, and residents from Superior would access that. We could pull data for
We
you.
donate to Sister Carmen for some of the same.
I'm looking for anything that will change hearts and minds.
Okay.
I mean, very big houses on the hill.
If you have, Superior has a lot of businesses, and along that corridor, I would imagine there's gonna come a time soon where there's gonna be an attempt to turn some of those large office buildings into multifamily housing. And if you do TIF funding for commercial, you could do a TIF where if they create some residential and a certain portion is, yeah, if a certain portion is affordable housing, then maybe you get a TIF incentive to make that transformation. The win for you is you get housing and they get to use the real estate that's empty.
Just sit up and see commercial buildings. They don't care about.
Well, they're not owned by people, they're like pension funds.
When I started in 2021, there was 17,000 non-owner occupied properties in Boulder County.
Yeah.
So people don't believe we have big houses in Boulder County.
It's
We
like
have big
50% of the houses in
There's a
Boulder City
residential
are not
and
owned by people.
And it's a commercial opportunity versus going after the construction. And I'm just gonna say that.
Yeah.
Last time I'll say that. Heidi's hands up.
I was just gonna say, maybe, I'm just throwing this out there. I know that one of the things that has been pretty frustrating for our service partners is that in order to access, because this is kind of the state's way of replacing some of the ERAP, emergency rental assistance dollars. In order to access that, you have to jump online or on a phone, like the first day of the month to get access to those dollars. And it has to be individual. And we don't know how equitably that's being distributed. So maybe it's advocacy for those dollars to be distributed to the local counties and then making sure that it's equitably distributed across the state. Just some food for thought.
Let's see how that can be.
Direct delegation.
All right, we're gonna be doing overtime here.
Yes.
We're going to creation and Barbara, you talked about the collaborations that are already there. So I didn't have anything when I'm looking through here. It wasn't like it was creation of affordable housing, but it was like the examples of what you've been doing. Maybe there was supportive services for sure.
Fulfill commitment to 12% targets. I think that came up in a couple of places.
Or look at zoning for ways to do more.
Yeah, I was just trying to think of the create, like, I think that is it, like. Yeah, I was just gonna ask for help towards it.
Yeah, no.
Fulfilling, or the way I heard it was like you would like to see more than 12%, but at least fulfill the 12%.
Yeah, we committed to 12% and part of reaching that goal is looking at our zoning. Working, I think, on this as well, working on process for construction. We have a concept review plan that we launched, so I think on this. See. We should have housing.
I got 12% goal, collaboration, this goal, possible habitat, $2 million in that. So if you see something more specific, please, we'll add it in there. Creation. For Boulder had 1B funding allocation to cities. Think about housing stability and healthcare. So maybe creation of. That much more towards supportive services. Healthcare. Yeah, probably. Or creation of housing using 1B funding. Which then would be prioritization of housing using the problem 23 that you talked about.
My mission to get people to stop saying 1B. That's why it's the thing.
Yeah, thank you. Affordable and attainable housing.
Let's see that.
Wouldn't be so much easier.
Yeah. There will be another one.
In my household growing up, that's pronounced I. I'm like, don't do that.
That's funny.
No, it's okay.
I'll wait to get the homework in action.
Yeah, thank you. And if anybody else has to leave, like literally, we will stay here and just fix the slides if we have to.
Okay.
And there'll be an opportunity if someone needs to go through there or something like that.
I believe as well.
Thank you.
I would like to say before I leave, a week from today, next Wednesday, is a road cutting for our modular facility. I think most or all of you received the invitation. Not talk to your staff, Dr. Lisa. And hope to see some of you there.
Thanks. Thank you.
Congrats.
And speaking of regional goals, like what would that look like if for a region we built a modular factory for all housing authority projects or ADUs or
This is
Okay.
for, this is
I know
this is
regional,
the city of Boulder.
Boulder and
It's
then
not-
Habitat.
No, but it's for the whole county, actually.
And what would it look like if we did one just to focus on backyard cottages, as an example?
Sure.
Yes, no, I love the facility. We got a chance to go to it a couple of times. And we'll try and be there at the ribbon cutting.
You'll try really.
Thank you. Creation of permanently supportive housing is what one was saying. Creation of variety of housing needs with housing authorities. The example was LHA there. Yes, that would be housing authorities.
Yeah.
And then Superior was talking about the senior affordable development as current creation. But using that as a model, so there's a way to do share creation of senior affordable housing as model for the region.
Yes, I was thinking just more of advocacy for. There's a lot of really antiquated beliefs about what affordable housing means, and I'm really done with that. So having a model in our community that doesn't look anything like that, and so maybe that fits more under advocacy. And that's not, I mean, there's many models in all of our, like, how do we promote and support like the re-education of people about what affordable housing means? So.
That could be original.
So I'm gonna go back up to the advocacy slide and add something like shared public education strategy, because I think that came up in 6. I have 8.
Yep. Or I'm sorry, creation. Okay, so that one. So the next creation. I meant Erie's. Which was just kind of connected to the goal that regionally. Working regionally was better than being on your own. Unit creation is important. Already part of the 12% goal. Question was, how do we incentivize expedited review for hearing processes? So I wonder if that's how that's connected to creation. Creation of incentives.
And we have
Like incentives.
We have a
for-
handful of tools that we've employed and we're working on even more. We're happy to share what we've done. Recognizing we're a neophyte compared to a lot of you guys. It's working so far.
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, but that would be really interesting if we all agreed that that's what we were going to focus on and learn about everybody's different incentives and how can we.
We baked it into like, if you want a new metro district, get incentives for having affordable housing goals. Want expedite review, affordable housing goals have to be in, stuff like that.
There was something some lines different. Thinking that to Lafayette. Collaborative approach, no one city can do it alone, use everything you can, HH, if someone hears something that. HHS tax like holders that they have. A responder,
Something
holistic
posted
approach.
about the,
Being resourceful, using our resources the best way we can.
sharing of credits across the region. Tax credits.
Jana, did we capture the zoning conversation in any one of these yet? like assessing zoning that could be barriers to the creation of housing?
Not yet. I don't.
Yeah, we haven't captured that yet.
I think it was combined with the other point
Yeah,
that we had
was
in advocacy and then it's separated.
He's first parsed it out. To speed up local development.
Yeah, I think there was, it was zoning and speed up the.
So
So it was-
I took, so I would recommend taking zoning out. Zoning is important, yes. But if you, zoning is something that just requires a public hearing. And I think you'll turn the public off if it appears as if you are not providing public review for zone changes. Now, education goes a long way on those zoning applications to make sure people understand what words you say. I mean, most of
We significantly reduced our single family zone kind of multi-use.
Okay.
And that's been in place, I think that started prior, I think it was 2018. For some changes.
I think we're looking at that stuff up there.
So that just helps to provide, more duplexes, townhomes.
There was also,
So that, could it be under creative?
Variety of
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of
houses.
the Texans.
Yeah, to, they want to see what post, how would we raise that? Was trying to save around.
For the PABs. I mean, I think just regional collaboration in all the ways that resources.
This trip, we basically, she was also talking about how Boulder County lent them money to buy the land. And then switch that around water and $14 million and stuff are more, I think. Sounded like disincentive sources to me.
I could ask her, because I took the notes and I missed the tax piece. So, okay, sorry, everybody, we'll keep. Okay, so I think we got through.
Did you want to add
The only
areas
one-
to ADUs? The question about gaps, gap housing type gap,
yeah.
because we were discussing that during the advocacy, and really said that was around services. And perhaps the gaps would be best listed on the creation of
The missing middle.
creation of housing.
In terms of the type of housing.
Nobody has condos, but.
What?
No one has
Yeah.
condos, they're not legal.
Yeah.
Diversity of housing types and also the.
I mean, that would be a state advocacy issue, right? Because it's construction type.
It is.
The diversity of housing types and also the diversity of incomes served by the variety of housing. Yeah.
I mean, some of this I wonder a little bit, because as we go, I mean, at least I know for the city of Boulder, because we're working on a lot of zoning stuff already, but do separate things for us would be a staff ask. And so there might be portions of this that, like, as we're thinking about prioritizing this list, there are going to be things for me that are easier for the city of Boulder to support or harder based on our staff availability.
So maybe we ask them to do it as with a regional lens on it. As they're doing the ranking.
Don't worry. So we can't go into the what ifs right now.
Yeah.
We will all come back together and then we'll walk through and talk about what would that unintended consequence be, or what would be the capacity issues.
Yes, I think that's only part, this is only part of what we didn't even get to the prioritization exercise.
Y'all get to do that later. Did we get through the?
I think we're down to supportive services then. Since I captured that one that also came up through advocacy.
Here.
The behavioral health, the mental health and recovery resources probably could be both in the advocacy and the supportive services bucket.
There is,
Mental health and recovery resources, is that what you said?
Yeah.
putting in their way. We have, somebody talked about a roadmap, identify gaps. There is a roadmap being done right now. I don't think it'd be a bad thing to put some focus into it, just so everyone, all the boards and councils are aware once it comes out. But just for information for folks. There was a support services creation of continuity of care. Again. Oh yeah, I put that in the chat. Thank you. Lafayette was talking about lessons learned from the co-responder. The supporter services,
It worked really well for us too.
holistic approach.
I think the Lafayette co-responder is also managed by the Boulder County Sheriff's Office like ours is. So we pay their salary, but they work for Boulder County and they office full time with us. Been a great resource for us. We're trying to expand it even more. To points made earlier, though, I wonder if there's progress we can make on the connective tissue between health services, addiction recovery, housing help, and avoiding homelessness. It's about already have in place there so we can look into it.
So I also had an additional one from our council that I didn't list out before.
Okay.
Which is
That's why you stayed late.
financial literacy, career development and training.
Yes.
Supportive services. Okay. Did we capture, did you need help with anything from the chat channel?
So just noticing that the first bullet and the third bullet are very similar. So if we're asking folks to prioritize, it feels like almost the same.
Yeah, and I think they were both mine. I'm fine with it.
Do you have a favorite bullet?
Let's do it. I was thinking keep the third one, since the first one is a duplicate.
That'll make it easier for people to explain to their groups. Okay,
So the co-responder program would be like for us, the core and leads team.
yeah,
So, and it's crisis outreach, response, and engagement. That's what the action.
There you go.
I was gonna, it was killing me, so I was like, I gotta.
that's good.
I never did.
Okay, I want to apologize that we're so far over time. That's not my normal mode of operation, and it felt really important to just get through this piece. So thanks for staying. So we will put together the next steps based on what we talked about. We'll get this out. And then we're gonna schedule another meeting.
Yeah, so I asked folks to hold November 13th on your calendars for a potential meeting date. And
We have the National League of Cities.
I'll be at the NLC as well.
okay, so that's not.
Tampa's still standing.
Tampa's still standing.
Apparently I'll be there.
Yeah.
I waited until yesterday to put my hotel. because I didn't know if I'd be there.
Not my flight. It's
Yeah.
very cheap. It's like a little over two.
So maybe we can take the scheduling conversation a little bit offline with you, Commissioner, just to see what might fit your schedule. I know November is just rough all around, so we may end up pushing it to December, is what I'm just gonna name.
So speaking of National League of Cities, if you want, well, if you want to share this, a lot of the panels, I know at least 3 of the panels that we typically sit in on are around this type of topic. And they're federal agencies and NGOs that support that we might be able to identify some type of whether a leverage tool that they might have, or tech assistance they might be willing to offer, or someone we can follow up with if we need to.
You'll all have a homework assignment no matter what.
Okay.
So you can do however you want to workshop it. Exactly.
Mayor Karen Bass has this, the national leader on homelessness initiatives out of Los Angeles. So she'll have workshops and panels for us.
Thank you. Heidi, go ahead.
I was gonna ask if I can have the permission to add one more on the supportive services, which is ensuring that the wraparound services meet acuity of need. So those that have the highest level of need have the most supports, and then those that have the lowest, we match accordingly. The wraparound services, it's something I'm actually working on right now with Division of Housing, so.
Thank you. That's great. Great. All right, thank you, everybody. Really appreciate staff staying to help us finish this part out. And we will see you all at a time to be determined.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jana, do you want me to hit the stop record?